you tell us a bit about your birth process from when you checked into the hospital and how that went?
Checking in the hospital was very exciting for me. Being a surrogate, birth is my favorite part of the whole process. So I'll never forget checking in the hospital with my first journey. Was even more incredible because Trish and Chloe took care of my paperwork and things like that, checking in, making sure that everything was on time and I was on time, which is very important because then it made me able to relax and just remind myself I'm there to give birth. So it was nice having that extra help and making me more relaxed and comfortable with the process. When I entered the hospital, my intended parents were actually waiting on me there. They got there early, and I'll never forget their faces when I walked in and we kind of like made that connection. That was really big for me. And I had a little bag, and my blanket in my arms, and I'll never forget them like adamant on wanting to take my stuff up for me. And we went up the elevator together and we checked in together, and they immediately let me and the intended mom go back together, and Dad waited in the lobby for the first little bit, and we checked into the room. And from the start, my intended mother was incredible. She took care of me. I'll never forget falling asleep when I first checked into the hospital because it was 5 a.m. and I had dozed off a little bit. And I actually woke up to her rubbing my face, which I don't know, those emotions just started from the time I was in the room with her to the time it was time to push. And they called the intended dad into the room, and he was just seeing them both light up like they were ready for me to go. And they were both on my right side holding my hand, and then the dad was holding onto like the side of my leg, and mom at the time. And just the whole time I'm looking at her, and she was just like, you got this, you can do this. And their support during that process is very emotional for me because they made me feel like I was on top of the world. And I pushed and he came out, and immediately, Dad cut the cord and they handed baby to the parents, and, we're checking out the baby. And the whole time they're experiencing the birth of their first child at that time, they were concerned about me. She never let go of my hand. She never stopped rubbing my face. And the whole time I'm like, is baby okay? Like, I wanted to know about the baby. And they're like, yes, he's okay, but you're good too, And that to me was huge. And again, that was what made me fall in love with surrogacy, was giving birth to that first child. And with my second journey as well, from the time we entered the hospital together, and they actually had another child at that time. Fun story, but so they had that child with them as well, and both parents and child were in the room when I gave birth. But they never once, nothing had their attention but me. Like, I had their attention, and they gave me that. It's their baby. And Dad, in that moment for my second journey, almost fainted during me pushing because he was nervous that I wasn't okay. So that's a fun story to talk about. But the support during labor was incredible. And, I had always been asked from the beginning if I wanted parents in the room. And for me as a surrogate, I did. And I also needed my agency there with me as well. So Trish and Chloe were on top of being there with me. And I think that's very important because if parents didn't want to be in the room, I still had the support that I needed. So that was really tremendously important to me. So having my agency there and having my intended parents there was incredible. And I can never let go of those experiences. And those are the reason I'm becoming a third-time surrogate. And I'm very proud to say that. I'm very grateful for the people that I've had to work with.
And I know everyone has a different experience for every journey, but can you talk a bit about communication after birth with each of your parents?
So I know from my experiences, they're very different than some people's. And, I get to hear other surrogate experiences now that aren't the same, or they didn't want to have that connection, or the intended parents didn't want that connection. But I feel like my agency did a great job at setting me up from the start on what to expect and not hold certain things on to intended parents, I guess is how I want to say that. I just think that from my second experience from my first journey from the start, they were, we connected on another level. And with my second journey, I at first when I met them, I thought that it was going to be the same way. We were going to connect that way from the start. But, with my second journey, it was my second trimester that took us to get that bond. So they were very different, and I never held that on them either. I think that through that process, it was very real with learning on what we could communicate and what we were comfortable with. For example, with my first journey, I didn't breastfeed. For my second journey, I did. That was something my intended parents were very passionate about. So the communication in that was very different. You know, we didn't communicate as much, and then at the end, with the help of my agency and Trish and Chloe, we were able to communicate what they really wanted, and then we connected on a different level. But we didn't always have that connection. And with my third journey, I'm not expecting that connection. I might meet an amazing couple that want to have a little bit of a distant relationship and don't want me as involved at the end. And as a surrogate, you know, you have to be accepting of that and okay with that. And I think my agency has always reminded me of that. And that is what makes me think the way that I do now, is I don't expect every journey to be the same or every relationship to be the same.
We want to set you up for success, you know, and we don't want you to have unfulfilled expectations, because surrogacy is such a personal journey for you and for the parents. And things happen during journeys, and people communicate differently, and you know, sometimes there can even be a language barrier. So we try to set you up in a way to where you kind of can expect anything, so that you don't have feelings where, you know, you may feel upset at things that didn't go exactly how you thought they may. So we hope we try to do a good job of explaining, you know, how all that could look. Surrogate compensation is one of the biggest, most important parts of a surrogate journey, being fairly compensated, but also keeping in mind that a lot of intended parents go through many, many hardships, as well as financial struggles, to just be able to afford their journey to create a family. Do you feel that you've been fairly compensated throughout your surrogacies?
Absolutely. And honestly, I think it's very important for surrogates to remember that you are a surrogate. You have become a surrogate for a reason. It's very easy to dive into the financial aspect of things or see a dollar sign on certain things. But for me, I always have to remind myself that, you know, my intended parents have been through a lot to become a family. And from medical aspect of things to maybe they did mortgage their home, or maybe they did have to get a second job to pursue a family that came so easy for me. And becoming a surrogate and being compensated, I have to always think about that. My agency does a great job with the compensation package, because they don't undercompensate either. But truly, I can't put a dollar sign on being a surrogate or being a mother, because my kids, I see them as kids, they're my children, and I love being a family. And as a surrogate, through this whole process, that's my big thing with my intended parents, is they're doing everything they can to be a family. So I think it's very important to remember that, especially with social media. It's easy to see different agencies offering different things, and there's a sense for me in being overcompensated. And I think that's really important.
For people that don't know much about surrogacy, what kind of misconceptions do you run into? What kind of questions do they ask you?
I think the biggest misconception with being a surrogate is the dollar sign on helping someone have a family of their own. That's a big thing with me. I have a lot of questions on how much I get paid, and those are questions I don't answer, because I'm not doing this for the money. Yes, do I get compensated fairly? I do, absolutely. And it's supported my family, and it's made it to where I was a stay-at-home mom for several years, so I could give my kids the things that I couldn't without surrogacy. But again, surrogacy is a whole amazing emotional world, and that's why I'm in it. It's not for the dollar sign. It's not for, oh, you did it for this reason. There's many reasons I became a surrogate. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is people just do it for the money.
And what are some of the things that you were able to do with your surrogacy compensation?
Well, the first thing was actually my first journey was the home I had at the time needed some work, and we immediately put it back into our home, and vehicles that we needed fixed, and financial burdens that we had at the time, I was able to take care of on my own. And that was, as a mom, that made me feel outstanding that I was able to take care of those things.
How do you feel about surrogates, first time, second, or third time surrogates asking upwards of $75,000, sometimes $80,000, even agencies? How do you feel about agencies offering?
Personally, I feel that is overcompensating. I couldn't put a price on being a surrogate, and I couldn't put a price on being an intended parent. That is a family, and you are going through many hardships to make that happen. And to me, that's overcompensating.
Well, we at Choice do believe that the gift that you give to families is absolutely priceless. So surrogacy is a long journey. The start of your journey is your screening. How did you feel when you first went to your IVF doctor's office?
I was very nervous from the start to go to my first office. I'd never been in an IVF center before. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what tests they were going to do. I didn't know what I physically had to go through. So, of course, my agency jumped in to support me with that and physically told me every step that I needed to go through. So that was reassuring. To have them there for that as well was amazing. Flying out for that appointment was a little different for my family because I had never been away from my girls that long. So I had to be away from them, but they were so supportive and we FaceTimed a lot during that process. But there was nerves for sure with the screening and getting comfortable with knowing what medications I'm going to take and how I'm going to take them. So I think that was, my agency played a huge role in making that easy for me.
And how did you feel when it became time to start your cycle calendar and your medications? Were you scared? Were you comfortable with your injections? And was that an easy process for you?
Well, I think for me, when you receive a giant package in the mail of injection needles and medications and you look at it and you're like, oh, this is what I'm in for. Like, this is what I'm doing now. That for me is when surrogacy became so real, was getting that for the first time and opening everything and setting up what I needed to take and how I needed to take it. It became real. It became so real and really almost overwhelming at first. Some getting used to, but the support I had from my agency and my family is what got me through it. I had tremendous amount of support from my mom, number one, I love my mother, and from my partner. And with IVF treatments, the support from your partner or your mom, dad, cousin, friends, that's very important. When I first started injections, that was really hard for me. I had days that I would get a little emotional and a little even upset at times with myself because I was nervous to do them or I couldn't reach a certain area I had to inject. So my partner at the time actually did several of my injections for me, and my mother, especially at transfer day. My mom was with me and I'll never forget her first time doing an injection. The feeling I had and with that support just honestly overwhelmed me. And I really couldn't do IVF without them because they have stepped in wholeheartedly and walked me through every step of it.
A support system is so important for a surrogacy journey. So I'm really glad that you had that. Can you tell us a bit about your transfer process, the good part, the fun part? How did it feel when you arrived at the doctor's office?
I had butterflies from the time I got on the airplane at home in my little small town airport to the time I arrived. I had butterflies and couldn't wait to get there. Of course, I had to do injections before I arrived, and then the waiting room process, you have to wait. And then when you go back, they always let me have that support system with me. So whether it be my partner or my mom or my agency, I think it's great that all my IVF clinics have let me have that support there. I think that played a huge role in making me comfortable. And my doctors and IVF centers walking me through the whole step and talking to me like I was almost family. I felt like family when I went through that. Transfers are a huge thing. They almost make you sweat, I feel like. Yeah. But honestly, for me, it was the coolest thing to experience because when you have your own child, you don't get to experience that. You don't get to see the process in that. But doing it in an IVF center and being able to see, the embryo on the screen and things like that is it's very rewarding. I couldn't imagine anything like it.
And you've had the opportunity to work with two really incredible IVF clinics. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences between the two journeys and kind of IVF treatment plan?
My agency was in constant contact with my IVF center through every process that I've experienced with every journey. And they always stay on top of my cycle calendar. So that was truly helpful for me because, as a woman and, as a mom, I had other things going on. So at that time, having that extra system to help me with my cycle calendar and make sure I stay on top of all my medications was great and very helpful for me through my journey.
Did you have any unexpected complications or bumps along the road during your journey?
Actually, with my second journey, unfortunately, I did. At screening, they actually found a uterine polyp, which I was very scared of because I'd never heard of it before. It can be cancerous, so my IVF center wanted to immediately go in, and we did a small surgery. They didn't deny me at first or anything. They went in and they did the small surgery and sent it off, did labs and testing on it to make sure that I was okay first. And I think that's very important to reiterate to surrogates is they are making sure you are okay. You are a priority in this process. And they did the small surgery. My agency was actually there for, they drove me to and from my surgery. So that to me was, they took that extra step. Trish held my hand through the whole process. Truly, she did. And it was just amazing to have that during that process. But once I was cleared, my IVF doctor actually performed that surgery. And then I was cleared after, and everything was great. And I think that's, things can come up during these processes. And it's very important that you have that agency and that IVF doctor that puts you first and make sure that, you're healthy for number one. And they've always done that with me. And I think I'm very grateful for that.
Your safety is first and foremost. So during the journey, we have to make sure that you're okay. Without you, there is no surrogacy and there is no baby. During your first journey, how did it feel when you first started to communicate with your intended parents?
At first, I didn't know how to go about that. So once legal was done, my agency created a group chat with me, them, and intended parents, which I thought was a great introduction because I didn't know what to say at the start. I was getting to know this family. And so we did a group chat, which was great because we were all on it and they were, really helping make me feel more comfortable with talking to my intended parents and my intended parents talking with me as well. So I couldn't have started that conversation off without them. I really couldn't. Trish and Chloe were really on top of that group, always answering questions or always asking about how the doctor's appointments were going. And then after that, parents had reached out and we communicated outside of the agency. We had emails, we had phone calls, text messages, and we did a lot of FaceTiming with appointments as well. So that's actually how we grew our bond, was the start from our group chat, just having our own communication, and it just grew from there.
Amazing. That's beautiful.